We have a reading from the Gospel according to Mark, chapter 5, verses 35 through 43. And while he was still talking, some men came from the house of the leader of the synagogue, saying, "Your daughter is dead. Why do you trouble the teacher?" Jesus heard the word which they spoke, and he said to the leader of the synagogue, "Fear not, only believe." And he did not permit any man to go with him, except Simon Peter and James and John, the brother of James. And they came to the house of the leader of the synagogue, and Jesus saw them in a tumult, weeping and wailing. So he entered and said to them, "Why are you excited and crying? The little girl is not dead, but she is asleep." And they laughed at him. But Jesus put them all out, and took the little girl's father and mother and those who were with him. And he entered where the little girl was laid. And he took the little girl by her hand and said to her, "Talitha cumi," which means, "Little girl, rise up." And immediately the little girl got up and walked, for she was 12 years old. And they were astonished with great amazement. But he commanded them that no man should know this, and he told them to give her something to eat. Here ended the reading. And now Reverend Macaulay will give us our sermon lesson.
We've just been returned from another wonderful Mexican Riviera cruise, and fortunately we avoided Hurricane Rick, and for the most part returned safely to Los Angeles. One of the things I noticed on this trip, and on other trips, is how often in life we receive messages or signs. I remember some years ago I was in Hawaii and I slipped and fell off a cliff. If it hadn't been for a very peculiar set of circumstances, I would have fallen off that cliff 200 feet below and certainly died instantly. Yet peculiarly, there just happened to be enough shrubbery growing out of the side of the cliff to catch me and allow me to climb back up on the path I had been following. I broke my arm at the time and didn't realize it until the next day when I went to the hospital to be checked out. On another vacation, a couple years later, I again broke the same arm after swimming in the ocean in Cancun. I slipped on a rock and fell, and it was the end of the vacation. One of the comedians on this cruise is named Jim David, and he made a point of saying in his act that our happiness is now. You never know what's going to happen to you. You may be in excellent shape in one moment, and in the next you can fall down and break your arm, or frankly, anything can happen which suddenly changes your life without warning. In his case, he was doing a show and stepped off the stage, and I guess he dislocated his shoulder, and realized that, our happiness is now. Often we take our health for granted. We ask in meditation that we realize radiant, vital, dynamic health now. But then we get ill and can't figure out what happened or what went wrong. At any given moment, your life can change, especially when you least expect it. So rather than say, "I'll be happy when I get enough money to buy a house," or "I'll be happy when I finish school," or "I'll be happy when I sell my house and move somewhere else," the fact is that those things may never happen. You may get enough money to buy, you may never get enough money to buy a house. You might think you have just enough, and then there's an emergency that uses up your funds. We can't say with any certainty what the future might bring. My mother planned to spend her retirement years reading books. She spent years collecting books, some of which she read when she got them, and others she kept to read later. The only problem was that when it came time to retire, she chose to leave her house and downsize to an apartment, which meant that so many of the books she had collected into her library had to be disposed of. She was only able to take a few books with her. Sadly, she later developed cataracts and found herself unable to read. So the plans she had so meticulously laid out for herself never came to fruition, because as she had hoped and planned. So the message here is that you should enjoy each day as it comes to you. If you're old enough to remember Pig Temple from the 50s, he had a daily children's show in the 50s, and every day he reminded us not to put off until tomorrow what we can do today. Don't wait for tomorrow to be happy. Your happiness is now. As I said before, life gives us many wake-up calls. Often they come in the form of a loss. If you've ever experienced the loss of a classmate in school or even at work, it makes you stop and wonder, what if I had been the one who lost my life? What if I was unable to go to work or school tomorrow because of a terrible accident? I recall hearing that a classmate from grade school had been shot when I was in my late 20s. My friend was a brilliant artist, and I never understood how someone could have taken his life. Yet he was here one day and gone the next. His death served as a wake-up call not only to me, but also to my classmates. We learn not to wait for anything or put off doing anything that makes us happy. Of course, without such a dramatic event, we may forget that lesson and need reminding. Every time we hear of the death of a celebrity, especially when it happens at an early age, that death serves as a reminder. It's a wake-up call for all of us. Michael Jackson comes to mind in that regard. He certainly died far too young. It's up to us to steer and maneuver our way through life's joys and through life's difficulties. If we're always putting our happiness on hold while we wait for some event to take place, we may miss out on all the joy life has to offer. Sometimes we say, if only I were taller, I'd be happier. Well, it's great to be tall, but height is something you get genetically, and I don't think we have a lot of choice about how tall we become. You've got to derive your own happiness another way. We might say, if only I could drive, I'd be happy. Well, you have other options for getting around. Walking is a start. You might find you have to take the bus and do some walking or use the subway if one is available. And of course, you can get yourself a bicycle or share the cost of driving with someone who has a car and can drive. I recall that in Dr. Bassell's church there was a sign in the sanctuary that read, "Be happy." What a simple yet profound message. We make that choice at every moment of each day as to whether or not we will be happy or unhappy. With everything we do, we make that choice either to be happy or unhappy. At this point, you could be thinking, I'm awake, aware, alert, alive, and happy. I don't need a wake-up call to get me back on track. If that's the case, then good for you. You're ahead of the pack. But there are some out there who may need a wake-up call. There are some who are feeling sorry for themselves, or who are wondering how they ended up where they are today. They may feel that everyone around them is better off, and they just can't figure out how to get out of their rut. If that's the case, I would consider meditation. If you're one of those people, I would ask, when was the last time you spent any time in meditation? If the answer is, it's been a while, then my recommendation would be to take some time and go into meditation. Still the mind. Get centered and balanced. Spend some time each morning in meditation, and after a week or two, I expect you'll see changes in your life and how you see yourself. You may get ideas as to how to use your time and talents. You may find a fresh new interest or meet new people who take your life in a whole new direction. In your meditations, ask God for guidance. Know that at every turn, there are universal guides to show you the way. Remember that Jesus told us that these and greater things shall you do. Are you doing those greater things with your life? You can, you know. As always, I want to remind you that with God, all things are possible. Whatever you set your mind to doing, you can accomplish that goal. Just as we heard in the scripture this morning, let Jesus' words fill your consciousness as you arise, and let your light so shine. All you have to do is spend time in meditation and ask and accept the help which is always available to you anytime, anywhere. Thank you for your attention this morning. Join me now in the acceptance statement.